great to actually see these many people interested in learning about the Maya. Thank you, Loa, for this introduction. Thank you, Jane, and everybody here. The exhibit is wonderful. Congratulations to both Loa and Simon, because it's really amazing. And it's actually great to see some pieces from Guatemala in the exhibit here, and it sort of makes you so proud. But anyways, I'm gonna take you in time, back in time, you know, from what Ricardo and David talked about this morning, and talk a little bit about how people were recording time in the Preclassic. We have a few problems with that, archaeologically speaking, because we're not as lucky to have as many monuments, inscribed monuments, as people in the Classic have. So I hope you will understand my whole argument about how we believe they were recording time in different ways than they did in the Classic period. And for that, I'm going to use the evidence from plain monuments. Some of them call them plain stela, but the implication of stela is a very strong one, so we decided just to keep with a wording of plain monuments. And here we have several examples of monuments that were recovered in sites in the Maya Highlands. These are from Naranjo that I will be talking about, which is where I'm basing my argument mostly, and this is from a recent site that we excavated this past year called Santa Isabel. And here I'm gonna sort of place you in geographically. This is where Naranjo is. It's only 3 kilometers north of Campanella, the well-known site, Maya site. And the time period when the site was occupied and used was around 800 BC, from 800 to 400 BC, so what we refer to as the Middle Preclassic. And at the time, there were very important sites, as you probably know, and Olmec Heartland here, with representations of plain monuments. And here we have examples from La Venta, examples from Teopantecuanitlan in Guerrero, and others from the site of San Lorenzo. So there's a tradition of having all these monuments being placed at important centers. Also, we have a lot of them on the Pacific coast, along the Pacific coast, and some in the Maya Highlands, as we will see. Much has been discussed about how people were keeping time, and individuals were very important in the society. Individuals that were very important in the society were those that were keeping time. They were patient observers of the sky, of the night, of the day, the sunrise, the sunset, and that gave power to these individuals. And to talk about potential examples of the first evidence we have of inscribed documentation of when these monuments were placed and actually written, the first evidence, which is sort of like what we can link the people that don't have inscriptions, are those from the Isthmus region. And this is an important region because we have examples from various sites, such as Stela C in Tres Zapote, that has an early calendrical date of 32 BC. And then we also have La Mojarra Stela that has a later date, or it has been dated to a later date of between 143 and 146 AD. And of course, some portable artifacts such as the Tuxtla statuette dated to 162 AD. But in the Maya area, we have also a few examples, and one of them is in Chiapa de Corzo, that we have a stela fragment and then also a piece of pottery that has some early date. But at the same time, on the coast, we have the important site of El Baúl and Stela 1, which dates to 27 BC. So it's one of the earliest dates, say, in the Maya region. But the problem is, you know, what's going on before that? We know that people were keeping time. There was a way they were doing it. And here's where landscape is so important. And it's very interesting what Ricardo mentioned about stela 10 and stela 12 and how they, across the landscape, you know, they incorporate the whole plaza within, plus, you know, up in the hills. So it's a complete universe that these people were including into the actual keeping of time. And here's an example just so that you get an idea how sometimes, you know, volcanoes, hills, and other geographical features become part of one entity, and how important this is for some groups. Amongst these, we have several of these Middle Preclassic sites that actually incorporate a geographical hill, a hill or some geographical feature into the arrangement. In this case, I just wanted to point out where the plain monument is connected to that main building, and here's a picture of the actual site. And here's that hill that's sort of a key element in the layout of this site. This is the site of Santa Isabel, Middle Preclassic, contemporary with Naranjo, which is the one I'll be talking about in a minute. And that has one plain monument, but has this very important feature that's integrated into the layout of the site, and it's something that Ricardo also mentioned. So the actual inclusion of all these features, the sacred geography, into the arrangement of the site, it's a key thing. And it's also connected to time, or ways of keeping time. Contemporary daykeepers in the Maya Highlands go and celebrate calendrical rituals up in the higher hills. And this is the hill of Campanella in Totonicapan, where people go, daykeepers go, and have performs special rituals in special days of the calendar. This is another hill called Tamborabaj nearby, and it's also a place where there are several celebrations. People come here with musical instruments. They have their sacred fires where they offer candles, incense, chocolate, and all kinds of things in specific moments of the calendar. And that has happened all over the place. And this is something that we actually can see in the archaeological record. And this is a way of understanding how people were keeping time before actually carving monuments. And I'll show you some of the archaeological examples we have. Landscape was important to link the sky with the earth, and people were very, very much into integrating it to their settlement, to their site layout, and to their sacredness and the practice of the different rituals, specific calendrical rituals they had. And this is just an example of Atitlan. Just recently, some work has been done underwater, finding an island that has several plain monuments as well, which is kind of interesting, but that's for another talk. Naranjo. Here we have Naranjo. As I mentioned, this is a time period when the site was occupied. It is completely abandoned, believe me. There's absolutely nothing after 400, and it stays abandoned till around 700 AD, when there's a ritual event, a specific event, connected to the calendar, and I'll get into it in a little bit. So that you, place yourself again. Here's Naranjo, and Caminalpuyu is only a short distance away. The geography, as I've been talking about, is very important. It's surrounded by ravines. It has a hill, which I will show you in detail, but then there's a larger hill on the west side of the site. And it's very interesting to actually be at the highest point of the site and look at the Agua volcano, which is right there. We carried out this project as a rescue project, unfortunately. So we had all these trucks behind us trying to get us out of the way because they needed to start the development. And however, it was a great opportunity because when I came to work here, nobody had actually excavated the site. A couple of colleagues had visited the site, Shuk being one of them who documented the first map, and he said that the site was in a coffee plantation, and he got in because he was good friends with the family that owned the site. But before that, nobody could get in, and even after, nobody could get in. There's a funny story about how the owners would keep Doberman dogs at the entrance so that they would keep archaeologists out. But anyways, so we got in and we did we carried out a whole project excavating the center and also documenting the residential areas, which gave us important information about the occupation of the site. And the composition there's this natural stone hill to the east of the site, and then there's a line of buildings, north-south, and there were 4 lines of monuments. A huge plaza. Very important. Keep that in mind for the future discussion. I'm presenting this as an old photo of Muybridge visiting, because he was a friend of the owner as well, and it shows how important it was. You could see the first row of monuments, the second one, and then the third one, and here the natural hill to the east, which is a typical layout of some of these Middle Preclassic sites. We have it in Teopantecuanitlan, in Guerrero, we have it in Xalcatzingo, in Morelos, and Las Bocas in Puebla. Several sites have this arrangement. And Cerro Naranjo is to the west of the site, and it's sort of like a landmark in the city, as you can see from this photo. Here are the 4 lines, and I'll be talking about some of them. The main mound is this one here, and we found a stairway that everything is built with clay, and that's part of the problem here because nothing preserves well, and we can't restore it. So, and the north platform, it's a building that had a dedicatory event around the year 600 BC, and there was a huge feast and a celebration for the dedication of this building. And on top of it, we found a series of features that, while some of them were placed during the Middle Preclassic, these same features were sort of revisited during the Late Classic, and that's the only time when the site gets revisited after its abandonment in 400 BC. And here we see 13 stones, which I show in detail in a minute. One plain monument at the center of them, another plain monument, a cross-shaped burnt clay feature, and a hearth. Hearths are very important for all these celebrations. Here's a detail of the monument. And here are the 13 stones. And at first, when we found this, we really didn't quite understand at the time what the site was all about, and we thought, okay, well, this is a line of a structure, the base of a structure. But no, the 13 stones were placed there for a reason. And obviously a calendrical reason. And as Dave was very, very good at explaining the calendar this morning, you know what 13 means and the importance of this number. So, and here we find a lot of burning activity, so connected to perhaps a perishable altar. Okay? And then I'll show you, this is the hearth that we found here. It had broken pieces of monuments, which in a way shows how these monuments serve their purpose, and they had to be transformed in a way of burning. Then in the Late Classic we have the deposit of 16 vessels from the Late Classic. It's called a motley ware. It's a specific ware from the Late Classic. And on top of that, we had what we think was a divination bundle. And there's one in this exhibit, which is kind of interesting to make those correlates. And this one had 13 pebbles, 7 of which were quartz. So again, the numbers and the important material of the stones is very important, because that's part of what daykeepers have as part of their day-to-day work. So, landscape, as I say, it's crucial to understand and to explain these sites. We also excavated the southern platform, the one placed here, which on purpose is left like that open because we could not find any structure on top of it. And it has amazing deposits on the corners of the platform. This was a natural platform that was barely modified, and we find amazing deposits of figurines, which is not necessarily the tradition in ceremonial centers. Figurines you tend to find in households. However, here they were placed at the center. And the interesting thing is, look at their faces. They are very different from each other. And here we have an example of a figurine that's identical to some that I studied from the site of La Blanca on the Pacific coast. On top of connecting it, there are others that are very much like sites in Chiapas in Mexico. So it seems as if these were portraits of individuals that might represent the visit of these individuals to the site. Line 1 is composed of 7 monuments, 7 plain monuments, 2 of which have altars. And this is something very, very particular. Why? Because of the dating of it. We have a good radiocarbon date that places the actual stela altar practice at Naranjo at 750 BC. There's an example at Chalcatzingo, which is somewhat contemporary, so you can tell that they were probably or surely commemorating cycles of time through the placement of plain monuments at the site. What was the story with the plain monuments? Did they have any painting? And when you think about it, we did all kinds of testing to determine that, and we couldn't confirm that that was the case. Some people have argued that they were wrapped with cloth and painted or stuccoed, but we did not find evidence of any of that. I think what happens with the plain monuments is how important the actual stone is. And that's something that David Stewart has mentioned recently about the materiality of the stone and the link of the stone to the earth, what the world is made of, and how important to represent that and actually put it into the landscape, and their sacred landscape is. So here we have other examples of the plain monuments on the second row. On the third row, which are just columnar basalts, this is the natural formation, how the stone comes out of the ground. And then the fourth row, unfortunately, we did not find in situ, but was found by accident while doing the drainages for the development, which is, but at least we have a good connection, good relationship with the developers, and they call us whenever they find new things. So when I was talking about the importance of the stone as a matter of the earth, that is something David has alluded, is a key thing to understand these monuments. In addition to going back to the arrangement, getting to Naranjo, accessing the site with these huge stones must have been really difficult. It's full of, it's surrounded by ravines, and the actual carrying of these monuments, and of course this is not Naranjo, it is La Democracia, but I felt like a good representation to show you how they probably carry the monuments, was probably an important experience that involved a collective group, which probably were part of a pilgrimage, and this is what I'm proposing the site was, a pilgrimage center. And by carrying these monuments, they were experiencing this communitas feeling that actually had them get to attain the feeling of liminality. So the difficulty in accessing the site, the many figurines that we found that represent different portraits of individuals that were coming from different places, the lack of burials. We found no burials with the amount of excavation we did, on top of the very ephemeral occupation of the houses, which of course we sampled and excavated, tends to support the idea of this as a pilgrimage place. On top of that, this was some of the things that we found at the very end of the last season we had, and this is a post hole that was placed on the western side of the site next to the ravine. And here you can see where the structure was located. Here, we found this, first we found it like this, we started excavating, we noticed it was a post hole. It was completely, it was oriented 90 degrees with northernmost part of Cerro Naranjo. And we've interpreted this as a potential flying pole or palo volador, which is a dance that happens these days in Mexico, in Veracruz specifically, but also in some Maya sites, as Joya Baja in this case, where 4 individuals go around, and each individual goes around 13 times, totaling 52. So it's very important. These calendrical celebrations are important, and this is the only explanation we can find for this feature. On top of that, we found a lot of hearths, which, at first we thought, okay, well, these hearths are to cook or to boil vegetables. They had to feed people because there were celebrations. These are all at the center of the site. But some of them are pretty large, and they don't have any trash. It's just fire. So fire is another feature that's linked to the celebration of these calendrical rituals that we can use as evidence to support the actual commemoration of time during the Preclassic at Naranjo. Here we have a reconstruction so that you get an idea of how the site might have looked like. But at 400 BC, the site collapses to the power of Caminaljuyu next door. And that's when Caminaljuyu has a gorgeous, not in 400, a bit later probably, but they have inscriptions and they start recording time on the stone, and showing obviously portraits of individuals that were also leaders of the community. So there was a dramatic change in the organization of the society at the time, taken over by Caminaljuyu, who probably controlled trade sources, important products such as obsidian nearby, jade, cacao connected to the Pacific coast, and that's how Naranjo sort of fades away. However, it is still in the oral history of people because somehow they were able to come back in the Late Classic and carry out this one event where I showed you all the deposits that sort of reminded people of the importance of the site. So I hope that I convinced you guys that during the Preclassic, despite the Middle Preclassic, despite not having writing, we were having records of time. Thank you very much.